My daughter-in-law sold my antique collection on a Tuesday morning while I was visiting my sister in Vermont. She arranged it carefully. She contacted 3 separate buyers, negotiated prices, accepted cash for the smaller pieces, and bank transfers for the larger ones, and had everything removed from my house by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 2, by the time I returned on Thursday evening, the shelves in my study were bare. The display cabinet in the hallway was empty, and 41 years of carefully, lovingly, obsessively collected antiques were gone. Blonde, she called me that evening. Her voice had the particular quality of someone delivering news they have decided to frame as a favor. "Margaret," she said, "I hope you don't mind. I took care of those old things in your study. I found buyers, good ones, serious collectors, and I got excellent prices. I deposited the money directly into the household account. I thought it would help with expenses." Purse. I sat in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and looked at the empty hallway where my grandmother's Victorian writing desk had stood for 17 years. "That was thoughtful of you, Renata," I said. "I knew you'd understand," she said. "Some of those pieces were just gathering dust. It was time." "Yes," I said. "I think you're right. It was time." I hung up the phone. And then I called the manager of the Beaumont Antique Gallery on Meridian Knott Street in Indianapolis. The gallery I have owned for 22 years, the gallery through which every single piece in my collection had been acquired, and documented and insured and registered, and I told her what had happened. What Renata did not know, what she had never been told, because it had never come up in the 8 years she had been married to my son David, because it was simply not information she had sought or I had offered, was that the gallery was mine. And what she was about to discover was that selling another person's registered, documented, insured antique collection without legal authority is not a favor. Meant it as a crime. I am so glad you are here with me today. Please stay until the very end, because what happens at the end of this story is something I want you to hear in full. Like this video if it speaks to you, and tell me in the comments which city you are watching from. I read every one, and knowing how far these stories travel means more to me than I can properly say. Belender, my name is Margaret Claire Beaumont. I am 73 years old. I live in a Victorian townhouse on Ashford Place in Indianapolis, Indiana, that I have occupied for 22 years, and that contained, until that Tuesday, one of the most carefully assembled private collections of 19th and early 20th century American antiques in the state. Belenja, I want to tell you how that collection came to exist, because it is not simply a story about objects. It is a story about a woman who spent 41 years learning something deeply, and what that knowledge was worth, and what happens when someone who does not understand value tries to dispose of something they do not own. I began collecting in Ichenjobai Basarsan. I was 32 years old, newly divorced from my first husband, working as an English literature teacher at a private school in Indianapolis, and I had absolutely no business spending $300 on a 19th century secretary desk at an estate sale in Carmel, Indiana. I spent it anyway, not impulsively. I had been reading about American antiques for 2 years by then. Books, catalogs, auction records, anything I could find. I had visited every antique shop and auction house in central Indiana. I had learned to recognize quality of construction, to date wood by grain and finish, to identify period hardware, to spot the difference between original pieces and later reproductions. When I saw the secretary desk at the Carmel estate sale, I knew exactly what I was looking at, and I knew it was priced by someone who did not. That desk sits sat in my study. I bought it in Ichenjubite Batsersan for $300. It was last appraised in Arsenling Arshar at $47,000. That is the nature of this collection. That is what 41 years of knowledge looks like when it is applied consistently over time. I remarried in Ichenjobai Joshii. My second husband, Gordon, was an architect with his own deep appreciation for the made world, for things constructed by hand with intention and skill. He understood what I was building before I had fully articulated it myself. When he died in Arsenling Joel, he left me the townhouse on Ashford Place outright and the inheritance that made the Beaumont Antique Gallery possible. Manja I opened the gallery in Artsenlingar. It is on Meridian Street, a proper gallery space with good light and careful climate control, and a reputation built over 22 years for knowing what things are and what they are worth. I have a manager named Francis who has been with me for 14 years and who runs the daily operations with a precision that allows me to be involved as much or as little as I choose. The gallery is known in antique circles in the Midwest. My name is attached to it, but my name is Beaumont, which is also David's name, which is a coincidence that Renata had apparently never examined. Again, David is my son from my first marriage. He is 48 years old. He works in insurance, lives 20 minutes from me in a suburb called Fishers, and is a good man in the specific way that good men sometimes are: genuinely kind, fundamentally decent, and occasionally willing to defer to his wife on matters he has not fully examined. Renata is 44. She is organized, efficient, and has a quality of decisive action that I have always respected in the abstract and found occasionally alarming in practice. She redecorated their house 3 times in 8 years. She has opinions about everything and the energy to act on them. In another context, these would be straightforwardly admirable qualities. The context, however, matters. Lent. The situation had been building for approximately a year before the Tuesday in Vermont. Mean Renata had begun over the course of the previous 12 months making comments about my townhouse, about the collections specifically, the pieces in the study, the display cabinet in the hallway, the corner cupboard in the dining room that had been in Gordon's family since Ichen Babai Basharti. Comments delivered in the warm, practical tone of someone who considers themselves helpful. Lend, all these old things must be such a lot of work to maintain, Margaret. Have you ever thought about simplifying? At your age, all this upkeep, David says you've had those pieces since before he was born. Do you really still need all of them? Carr. I responded to these comments with the pleasant noncommittal acknowledgment I have developed over 73 years for situations that do not yet require a direct response. I said things like, you might be right, and I think about it sometimes, and it's a lot. Certainly, what I did not say was that corner cupboard in the dining room is worth $68,000. The piece in the hallway is worth $31,000. The collection as a whole was last comprehensively appraised 18 months ago, at a total value of $412,000. Every piece is documented, registered with the gallery, and insured individually under a specialist fine arts policy that costs me $2,300 a year. I did not say any of this because Renata had not asked, and because the particular kind of help she was offering, the help that positions itself as concern while calculating the value of what it is concerned about, did not strike me as something that would be discouraged by information. The conversation that crystallized my understanding happened in March. Renata and David came for Sunday dinner. After dinner, while David was in the kitchen helping me with the dishes, Renata was in the study. This was not unusual. She often wandered the house, which I had always attributed to restless energy rather than inventory. But when she came back to the dining room, she said very casually, "Margaret, I was looking at your pieces in the study. Have you ever had them valued? Some of them look quite old." I told her they had been valued. "Yes." Banned. She asked when. I told her recently enough, she asked, smiling, whether I had ever thought about liquidating some of them. That was the word she used, liquidating, not selling, not finding new homes for. Liquidating, which is the word you use for assets, not for objects that have been loved for 41 years. Me and I said I thought about a lot of things. She nodded, satisfied, and moved the conversation to her daughter's school play. I finished my tea and looked at the corner cupboard and made a mental note. The mental note was this: call Frances at the gallery. First thing Monday morning. Band of Frenches has managed the Beaumont Antique Gallery for 14 years. She is 59 years old, has a master's degree in art history, and knows my collection as well as I do because she has helped me acquire, document, and insure each piece as it came in. When I called her on that Monday morning in March and described the conversation with Renata, Frances was quiet for a moment. Bobbed, and then she said, "What would you like me to do?" I told her I wanted to ensure that every piece in the collection was fully documented in the gallery's system with photographs, provenance records, insurance details, and purchase history, and that I wanted a complete updated appraisal report from our appraiser, Dr. Harold Sims at the Indiana Antique Appraisers Association. Frances had all of this completed within 3 weeks. Dr. Sims conducted the comprehensive appraisal over 2 days, photographing and assessing every piece in the townhouse. His report was 43. It valued the collection at $412,000 and documented each piece with the specificity that makes a report like that legally useful. Beamed. I also called my attorney, a woman named Gloria Ashworth, who has handled my affairs for 16 years. I told Gloria about Renata's comments and my concerns. Gloria updated my estate documents to include a specific clause addressing the collection, listing every piece by its gallery registration number, appraised value, and designated disposition. She also prepared a formal property inventory, signed and notarized, which she filed with her office and sent a copy to me by registered mail. And then I went to Vermont to visit my sister Eleanor for a week. Fine, because I had already done what needed to be done. And because Eleanor had not been well and needed company. And because I am 73 years old and I will not organize my life around the anxiety of what other people might do. Man, I trusted my preparation. I have told you what happened on Tuesday. And I have told you that Renata called me Thursday evening to report what she had done, framed as a kindness. Meaned, what I have not told you is the full scope of what she sold. Frances confirmed it over the following 2 days, cross-referencing the gallery's registration records with what remained in the house. 37 pieces, gone, including the Ichen Babai Basarsan secretary desk, including a set of 6 shaker chairs acquired in Ichen Jubite Joserchi, including a 19th century Pennsylvania blanket chest, that Gordon's family had owned and that Gordon had given me on our first wedding anniversary, including a federal period mirror from Ichen Babai Isur that I had purchased in Arsene Lingsan, that doctor. Sims had appraised 14 months ago at $31,000, 37 pieces. Combined appraised value, $308,000. The amount Renata had collected and deposited, $44,000. Banned. She had sold $308,000 worth of antiques for $44,000. Bland. This is what happens when someone who does not understand value tries to sell things they do not own. They find buyers who do understand value and who are, in that transaction, the beneficiaries of someone else's ignorance. Ben, I sat with these numbers for 1 day. I let myself feel what I needed to feel. The grief of losing Gordon's anniversary gift, the particular pain of the secretary desk I had carried from that estate sale in Ichen Jubite Batsersan for 41 years. I am not a person who skips grief in order to get to action. Grief is not weakness, it is honesty. And then, on the second day, I called Gloria. Tell me exactly what she did, I said. Gloria already had the outline. She had been reviewing the situation since my initial call to Francis. What Renata had done, Gloria explained, broke down into several distinct legal categories. First, theft. Renata had no legal authority over any item in my home. She was not on any deed, not named in any power of attorney, not designated as an agent for any purpose. She had entered my home. David had a key, which she had used, and removed property that was not hers and sold it to third parties. Second, conversion. The legal term for the civil wrong of taking someone's property and treating it as your own. This gave me grounds for a civil suit. Third, fraud. Some of the buyers Renata had approached had asked about provenance. Frances learned this through her industry contacts. The antique world in Indianapolis is not large, and word travels. Renata had represented herself as the owner of the pieces. This was false, and she had known it was false. What about the buyers? I asked. They were collectors, presumably. Some of them may have bought in good faith. Band buyers who purchase stolen property, even unknowingly, do not acquire good title, Gloria said. You remain the legal owner of the pieces. They have recourse against Renata for their purchase price, but the pieces are yours, all 37, I said. All 37, Gloria said. Lund, I want to tell you about the phone call I made to Renata before the legal process began. Because I made a deliberate choice about how to handle that call, and I want you to understand why. I could have called immediately. Thursday evening, the moment she hung up. I could have called back and told her exactly what she had done and exactly what it was going to cost her. The anger I felt in that moment would have made that call easy and probably somewhat spectacular. Blamed I did not make it. I waited 4 days. I let her believe that I had accepted her version of events. The helpful daughter-in-law, who had done a favor, cleared out some dusty old things, deposited some money in the household account. I let her feel settled. And during those 4 days, Gloria had filed a formal police report for theft of property and retained a civil litigation specialist named Howard Park. Howard had, within 3 days, sent formal demand letters to each of the 3 buyers, notifying them that the items they had purchased were stolen property, and that the legal owner was demanding their return, or, where return was not possible, full appraised value. 2 of the 3 buyers, both experienced collectors who understood the legal situation immediately and wanted no involvement in a theft case, agreed to return the pieces within 5 business days. When pieces returned, Bam, the 3rd buyer, a dealer from Cincinnati named Walsh, had already resold 4 of the pieces to clients of his own. He retained a lawyer and indicated he intended to fight the matter. Howard Park, who has the quality of someone who finds legal opposition invigorating rather than tiring, indicated he was looking forward to it. Lemmed on the 5th day after the Tuesday in Vermont, I called Renata. Lapped. She answered with the brightness of someone who believes the previous conversation had gone well. Plund Renata, I said, I need you to come to my house today. Bring David. This is not a conversation for the phone. A pause. Is everything all right? Come at 2 o'clock, I said. I'll make tea. They arrived at 2 o'clock. David looked uncertain in the way he looks when he suspects a conversation is going to be difficult and has not yet been told why. Renata looked carefully composed. I had asked Gloria to be present. Gloria sat in the armchair by the window. I introduced her as my attorney. I watched Renata's face absorb that information and recalibrate. I did not raise my voice. I want to be clear about that. This was not a dramatic confrontation. It was a conversation conducted at the temperature of absolute clarity, which does not require volume. B. I told them what Renata had done. I used specific numbers. $308,000 in appraised value. Well, $44,000 received. 37 pieces removed without authorization. I told them about the gallery registration. I told them that every piece was documented with photographs, provenance, and insurance records. I told them that 2 buyers had already agreed to return 21 pieces and that the third was the subject of active civil litigation. I told them about the police report. David went pale at the words police report. Renata's composure fractured in a way that was not complete collapse. But was the visible evidence of a structure under sudden stress. Wumble, I was trying to help, she said. I thought, you thought they were not worth much, I said. You thought they were old things gathering dust. You thought you understood what you were looking at. I paused. Renata, I own the Beaumont Antique Gallery on Meridian Street. I have owned it for 22 years. Every piece in this house was acquired through the gallery, documented by the gallery, and is registered as Gallery Associate. What you sold on Tuesday morning is not old things gathering dust. It is a documented, insured, legally registered collection worth $412,000, and the 37 pieces you disposed of are worth $308,000, for which you received 44th. The silence in the room had a particular quality. David looked at his wife. Renata looked at the table. Then David looked at me, and in his face I saw something that was not accusation directed at Renata. Not yet. That would come later, in private. But a kind of slow, heavy reckoning. The specific expression of a man who is understanding, for the first time, the full scope of what has happened under his roof. Jamily, Mom, he said. What do you need us to do? Kino, the resolution took 4 months. Lend, the 21 pieces returned by the 2 cooperative buyers, were restored to my townhouse within the agreed timeline. Francis and Dr. Sims inspected each one and confirmed no damage. Bam, the Cincinnati dealer, Walsh, ultimately settled rather than proceed to trial. Howard Park had built a case that Walsh's attorney assessed as unwinnable, and Walsh agreed to return 2 of the 4 resold pieces, which his clients rendered voluntarily upon being informed of the situation and to pay appraised value for the 2 that could not be recovered. The settlement was concluded in the 4th month. Renata's personal liability for the remaining deficit, the gap between what she had collected and what the pieces were worth, was addressed through a civil agreement negotiated by Gloria and Renata's attorney. It involved a payment schedule drawn from David and Renata's savings. That I found more painful to accept than I had expected because it hurt David, and hurting David was never the goal. But accountability is not the same as punishment. It is the necessary consequence of action, and allowing Renata to sell $308,000 of my property and face no financial consequence would have been a different kind of wrong. Bounds the criminal matter. The police report I had filed was ultimately resolved without prosecution at my request after full restitution had been agreed. I made this decision not from forgiveness, which is a longer process, but from pragmatism. The civil resolution was complete, the collection was substantially recovered, and a criminal prosecution would have cost everyone, including David, more than the outcome justified. 34 of the 37 pieces came home. 3 are gone permanently, including, painfully, Gordon's anniversary blanket chest, which Walsh had sold to a private collector in Michigan who could not be located within the litigation timeline. For those 3, I received appraised value in the settlement. It is not the same. It will never be the same. The blanket chest that Gordon gave me on our first anniversary is in someone's home in Michigan, and I do not know whose. That loss is real, and I carry it. But 34 pieces are back on their shelves, in their places, in the house on Ashford Place where they belong. David and I have spoken many times in the months since. He is working through something complicated, the love for his wife, the knowledge of what she did, the understanding of what it cost, the process of determining what kind of marriage survives that knowledge and what work it requires. I do not involve myself in that process beyond listening when he needs to speak. Bondas. He told me once, on the phone, late on a Tuesday evening, that he wished he had known about the gallery years ago. I asked him why, he said, because then Renata would have known, and none of this would have happened. My thought about that, David, I said. Renata knew the pieces were old. She asked if they had been valued. She used the word liquidating. She knew enough to know they had worth. What she did not know was that the trail of documentation made the action impossible to conceal. I paused. I am not certain the gallery knowledge would have changed the decision. I think it would have changed the calculation. Bond, he was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. I know, I said. I know you are. Lummed. Here is what I learned at 73 years old. Document everything you love, not because you distrust the people around you, because documentation is the language the legal system speaks, and when something goes wrong, the only conversation that matters is the one conducted in that language. 43 pages from Dr. Sims. Photographs, provenance records. Insurance policies. Gallery registration numbers. That documentation was not paranoia. It was love made legally legible. Know the value of what you have built. Not approximately. Exactly. And make sure that value is recorded somewhere beyond your own memory. Memory is not evidence. A signed appraisal report is pay attention to the words people use when they talk about your possessions. Liquidating is not the word a person uses when they are simply curious. Words reveal assumptions, and assumptions reveal intentions, and intentions that you identify early are intentions you can prepare for. And understand that preparation is not hostility. I did not prepare because I wanted conflict with Renata. I prepared because I understood what was coming and I loved my collection, and I was not willing to lose it to someone else's decision about what it was worth. 41 years of knowledge. 41 years of patience at estate sales, of reading, of learning, of building something piece by piece with my own education and my own eye and my own money. That is not old things gathering dust. That is a life's work, and it was worth defending. Beamed. I was 73 years old when my daughter-in-law sold my collection while I was visiting my sister. Mendai was 73 years old when 34 pieces came home. I am 73 years old this morning, sitting in my study on Ashford Place, looking at the secretary desk I bought in, Ichenju by Batsursan for $300 and have loved for 41 years, drinking my coffee in the particular quality of Indianapolis morning light that comes through the east window at this hour and falls exactly on the secretary desk's surface, as if it was always intended to land there. Renata thought she was solving a problem. She did not know she owned nothing in this house. She did not know I owned the gallery. She did not know I had already called Francis. Manda, she celebrated on a Tuesday evening, satisfied with what she had arranged. The celebration lasted 4 days. Then I made the tea, and the rest is what you have just heard. What would you have done? Would you have called immediately, or waited and let the documentation do its work before you said a single word? Tell me in the comments below, and tell me which city you are watching from today. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who has built something over a lifetime, and needs to know that what you build deserves to be protected with the same care that built it. Lumbedius from Stories of Margaret. Thank you for being here with me. What you have built matters. Protect it. Never stop protecting it. Never.